work in manufacturing. Been here about 5 years now. It's a family business. Prior to this, I was working in construction. I have a total work ex of about 11 years. And in the last couple of years, the business has been doing pretty well, good growth. But we had a couple of unprofitable orders, and or I should say the profits were less than what we expected. And I found that I didn't have the tools that I needed to be able to analyze the situation properly and propose a comprehensive solution. And I figured that I'd do a series of short-term courses, weekend courses and the like. IIM Bangalore offers some very good ones. But after speaking to my wife, she suggested that I go for a full-time MBA. And any MBA worth my while would require a GMAT. I also wanted to work abroad to try and see what kind of operational systems are in place for international manufacturers, so that when I do return to my business, I could emulate those models. That's why I decided to get an MBA abroad, and for that I needed a GMAT. Hence, I started with a baseline mock. That's the recommended approach, and I got 690. And I did GMAT classes, and I took another mock, and I got a 680. So I was a little surprised. And my sister recommended that I find some personal tutors, maybe someone that could figure out exactly where my approach is going wrong. And I was already on GMAT Club by then, and I looked through some of the resources. Of course, most of the reviews were for trainers and tutors in the US. But the one that stood out for me in India was Crackverbal, and it seemed like there were some excellent reviews. And that's was first in touch with Ankit. And he was very quick in telling me that this is our approach. We have a personal tutoring package. Seeing your scores, I don't think you'd need more than 10 hours. And I didn't believe him at first. I thought I'd need a little more sustained tutoring. But I realized fairly soon, once classes started, that the approach is completely different here. Rather than, so I think my approach had been pretty much what any competitive exam student would follow in India, which is do as many mock tests as you can, do as many practice questions as you can. And that's actually useless if you end up reinforcing an incorrect approach, which is what is happening in my case. So once I started with Deepankar, he indicated that it's much better to do 5 problems in a day and take 1 hour with each one of those problems, but analyze the process and the approach that you're taking, so that you can so that you can zero down on which aspect of your approach needs correction or improvement or whatever the case might be. And I mean, I couldn't understand it at first, but I decided to trust the process and went along with it. And maybe a few classes in, I could see improvement already. So the problems that I had were mostly to do with critical reasoning. And I thought that I would spend all 10 hours just on CR. But both Devamitra and Deepankar, Devamitra being the quant mentor, Deepankar is the verbal mentor, both of them recommended that I should also take some time to touch on the other topics, just to make sure if there are any really weak spots or pain points that I can cover them at least a little bit. So despite RC being a fairly strong area for me, we did some exercises. He kept giving me some assignments so that I stayed in touch with it. But like I said, with critical reasoning, that's the one that I found most problematic. So that's where we spent the most hours. And I think that so the ability to tailor the course and put as much weightage as you want on the area that you need, I think that's what worked for me best.
What you said is true, right? Everyone has this very brute force approach towards tests, where you have to just do thousands of questions and things like that. And GMAT is very different. And we keep telling them that we keep talking to students and we tell them that this is a test that is testing your ability to maybe do an MBA also in future, right? Because every aspect of it is testing you on that. And I'm so glad we were part of your journey, Shantanu. And I think
as glad as I am.
More from the aspect that you told us, right, which is the focus is that at every point the idea is that analyze and figure out where you're going wrong, and then kind of do a course correction on it, because otherwise you just feel that you're just running in the wrong direction, right? So running, but still running in the wrong direction.
I'll just I'll make one minor correction. I didn't think I was running in the wrong direction. I had no idea which direction I was going in. I kept the questions. There was no improvement. So there was frankly no direction at all. So I think that qualitatively each one of those hours I spent might be you can't compare, because let's say another type of approach is your regular classroom approach, where there are, let's say, 5 or 10 students, and you go over the basic concepts and then give them some assignments and come back, and somebody gets 6 right, somebody gets 9 right. So that might be okay. I think it would be unfair for me to comment whether that's suitable or not. All I'll say is it wasn't suitable for me. It's not what I needed.
Right. Awesome. So what did you feel? How was the test day for you?
Before that, I should tell you, I was going back to studies after a decade. I completed my graduation in 2013. And I had done, there was no academic effort or any kind of academic endeavor in those 10 years. So the closer I got to the exam, the more anxiety sort of started building up. And I had one session with Arun, and he was extremely helpful in pointing out just minor things that could sort of, that could help me create a process that would keep me grounded on the test day. And it was just very basic things that seem obvious, but they didn't strike me at all. He said that I should try meditating, that in case, you get a couple of questions wrong, or you feel like you've gotten a couple of questions wrong, take a pause, take those 10 seconds, because those 10 seconds might take away from the next question. But if you continue in that anxious state of mind, you'll mess up the next 3. And I think that session helped a lot. It just created a perfect kind of a capstone where the academic part or the approach was kind of set in place by Dipankar and Devamitra for the font bit. And this was more to do with the approach itself. So when I started out, I made sure I didn't drive there. I took a taxi and listened to some relaxing music. Once I was there, I meditated for a few minutes. And I think it went as smooth as it could have. I will say this though, that there are a number of regulations in place in the center which might seem a little unusual, to the extent that they won't even allow you to take in a water bottle. So just make sure that you're going through the regulations, the rules and regulations, the way the exam takes place, that every student should go through that very carefully. So they don't even allow you to take in a pen and paper. You get that laminated sheet and the special marker. That takes some getting used to. I ordered one off Amazon, fortunately, and did all of my mock tests using that. For 400 rupees, I think it makes all the difference. But if it's a last minute thing, you might end up thinking, oh, the nib isn't working properly, and oh no, my test is gone. And I was reading an interview of one student, a lawyer, who wrote the GMAT and managed to score something like a 660 or 670, despite scoring above 750 on all of his mocks, because when he started using that pen, the ink wasn't flowing very well, and he wasn't accustomed to it. So it could be something as small as that, and that's something that minor shouldn't affect your score if you've taken several months to prepare.
That's true.
But I realized shortly after getting the 730 that it makes no difference to the admissions committee. A 730 and 750 is practically the same for them. The only difference it would have made is if I got maybe a 780 or a 790. And I think that there's a certain weightage that a lot of MBA aspirants end up putting on the GMAT, which makes it seem like that's the end goal, whereas it's actually just a tool you're using to facilitate your admission. And if you start out with that approach, you might end up scoring even better.
So, Shantanu, I wanted to ask you one thing, right? So, when you were talking about your GMAT prep, you also mentioned that you did not know where you were going, right? More from a direction perspective.
Right.
You have to pick CR, SC, or RC, any one of them. What was that major thing that completely, something that one aspect of, like, for example, you said, oh, I didn't know this. Was there something in any of these sections where you said that, oh, I had never thought about it this way, or something like that you can think of?
Of course, I can think of several, but the two biggest ones for me are sentence correction. So starting out, Deepankar said, this is where you save time. It may be a very convoluted compound sentence with multiple clauses, multiple modifiers. You have to be able to finish it in 30 to 45 seconds. And I thought that's impossible. But by the end of it, I was doing that. And the other thing was that within sentence correction itself, that I was using the approach of this sounds right to me. It looks like it belongs in a book. And that made me select a lot of incorrect options. So got rid of those. And started working clause by clause. And there was a certain approach that, it would be difficult to sort of condense it into 30 seconds, but a structured approach that we built up over 2 or 3 sessions that allowed me to kill it in the parlance of our times. And save time so that I could reallocate it to CR, which was more difficult for me.
Right.
Within CR, I think the biggest change would be I would tend to go for the first option that appeared right and that fit into whatever logical frame I had set in and go ahead with it. Deepankar's approach was you have to go through every option and justify within your own mind why each option is wrong or each option is right. And after going through the options, you have to come to the correct option and you have to fail to prove it wrong. So that was a radically different approach, but it made me realize that there may be some things that appear right because of tricky language. They do tend to, GMAT tends to use a lot of language to try and trip up students. And by eliminating everything that is clearly wrong, you end up reaching something that may or may not be, either you're in a little bit of a, a little bit of a doubt that this still may be wrong, but you're unable to prove why. Or otherwise, you reach the conclusion clearly and say this has to be the obvious answer and move on. So the process itself actually shouldn't take more than a few months if you're not doing anything else. But I think it would be better if you started out, let's say, a year before round 1 of the year in which you intend to apply. Because that gives you, let's say, 3 to 6 months to be able to get your approach right and get a good GMAT score, and then move on to the application part. And the reason I say that is because there were a number of personal developments that happened that kind of derailed my plans. I had some health issues as well that forced me to delay my GMAT date. And then that kind of causes a domino effect in my entire application schedule. So just give yourself a year. You don't need to quit your job. You can start with a couple of hours of just getting back to academics. And I think that would be a much better approach, rather than try and cram it into, let's say, a 3 or 6 month period. Crackverbal, I would have been nowhere close to the place where I reached. I'm not just saying that. I really am very grateful. You have a fantastic team. I had a fantastic time with both Deepankar and Devamitra, and even the support team, even Ankit. He was very clear in outlining exactly the approach. Arif, Arun, every one of you. Thank you so much.